Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last Sustainable Development in Latin America and the Caribbean session of the week. We're just going to give it a couple of more minutes so that attendees can start trickling in the call. So sit tight. We'll begin soon. All right, I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last session of the week. This is the Sustainable Development in Latin America and the Caribbean Conference, organized by the Latin America Student Interest Group at the School of the Environment here at Yale. Throughout the week, we have had amazing talks, very inspiring and very informative, going from water issues to forest protection and restoration, and even stories on the ground in the Amazon. And this time, as we like to say in our own countries, vamos a cerrar con broche de oro. We will close with a flourish by getting inspired with some of the most innovative and out-of-the-box thinking that can shape urban life. We have two amazing panelists today that will be talking to us about this. Just a reminder to attendees, if you have a question for any of our panelists, please type your question in the Q&A box, which is in the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure to address it at the end of the panelist presentations. Also, if you'd rather write your question in Spanish, please do so, and we will make sure to translate it. So starting with the introduction of our panelists, I'll start with Mariana. Mariana Alegre was born in Lima, Peru. She studied law and has an MSc in City Design and Social Science from the London School of Economics and Political Science, as known as LSE. When studying her first master's in human rights, she decided to promote urban rights. She has been involved in several research projects and academic work, in particular about sustainable urban mobility, public spaces, and urban renewal with social inclusion processes. Since 2010, Mariana is the executive director of Lima Como Vamos, a citizen observatory whose mission is to evaluate quality of life.
Yo no, yo por solución de problemas puedo esperar.
And Chalacos, Lima's and Callao's neighbors. On December 2014, and with the support of the Avina Foundation, she founded Occupy Your Street, or Ocupa Tu Calle, a strategy that seeks to develop more and better public spaces through participatory processes and promoting citizen urbanism. She's also a professor in the Pontificia Universidad School of Management Mariana's research focuses on different urban phenomena, in particular about sustainable urban mobility, public spaces, and urban effervescence of citizen movements and urban disobedience. In addition, she leads Nodal, Urban Nodes of Latin America from where Mariana seeks to contribute to training and empowering the new urban generation of Peru and the region, to transform it into a system of sustainable cities. In her free time, Mariana writes opinion columns for Peru 21. She rides her bike and walks around her city. Mariana, the floor is yours. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Very glad to be here and to share with you some of the processes that we have been doing along these quite challenging pandemic times. And of course, I will be happy to answer any question that you'll have after the presentation. So please give me a couple of seconds to share my screen. Okay, so please confirm me that you are already seeing the screen. Yes, okay, good. So, again, I'm very, very thankful to be invited here, and I'm happy to share this with you. We have some activities that we have been developing since the beginning of the process, but at the same time, we have been challenged to adapt ourselves to the context. And to this public health threat, we also need to think how the cities and how the public space is organized and is offered to us. So with that, we have make some different processes along these few months, and we have managed to actually have some impact not only in public policies but also within the people's lives, and that's why what I am going to tell you now. So so just for you to know us, since 2010, we have been producing data and information and indicators and different information to help in the public debate and also to help on the decision-making process on public policies. We do this through a big component on evidence and on hard data that we also try to organize and communicate it effectively depending on which is the audience that we're talking to. It's different to talk with, I don't know, a Congress person or to talk to a neighbor in his own area. And we do promote a lot of active citizenship. So we encourage people and we organize a lot of persons to actually empower themselves through the data, through the information, to actually manage to fight for their rights when it comes to time. And unfortunately here in Peru, it's a lot of time that we need to fight for our rights in terms of the city approach. So while saying that, since 2010, we have 3 founder partners, which one of them is a media, which is the Grupo RPP. Another one is a university that I am part of, which is PUC. And then we have a social organization from a company. And that's quite interesting because we managed to organize these 3 different sectors together to work for a better city, which in the short and also in the long term will benefit them too. And so our work is divided in 4 areas. One, as I already told you, is about all the data and the evidence-based processes, which is the knowledge area. Then we have this area of communication. Then we have this area of articulation, alliances, and connections that we constantly make and are happy to put people together to actually get to their objectives easier. And then we have this 4th area, which is about action. And for example, one of our projects, which is Ocupa Tu Calle, Occupy Your Street, is one of these action projects. And it was not the plan of the beginning of the process. We were in the Lima Como Vamos project only working for looking at the data, compiling the data, putting the data at disposal, but we were not actually having to make some changes directly. But then I think like maybe 5 years working on the Lima Como Vamos in the more typical model, we actually shift this idea. And that's why I'm going to talk to you about, which is Ocupa Tu Calle and a couple of the processes that we have been making right now in the pandemic's time. So this process, this project works towards a concept which is called citizen urbanism, which is a model, or it proposed an idea to actually work with, for, with the people and for the people, and to introduce these really serious participator processes in the decision making, and of course in the building of, in this case, public spaces. So the idea of the urban form, or the idea of the urban composition, is extremely related with how people are or not put in the center of the process. Peru and a lot of cities in Latin America have a more classical approach of urban planning, which is this big and probably white male architect kind of saying what people will need. So then they design some spaces for them, and without, of course, addressing the needs of the people. And in the other side, we do have an absence of actually urban planning. So when people start needing housing and, of course, public services, they will not have neither the money from the public government to invest on them, nor the I don't know, the tools for actually fulfill their rights. So we have a lot of informal settings that have been, as one professor here, Julio Calderón, says, dejar hacer, dejar pasar, which has been the policy of the state, to let them do whatever they want, and we will not see what's happening. It's mostly the public housing policy of the government until now. So within this, in this process, we have been on a trial and error process since we begin. We do see ourselves as a space for experimenting processes. Some of them fail, some of them are successful, but we managed to have built 52 urban interventions in 18 districts or cities, districts from Lima and cities from Peru and Latin America. And we have different municipalities. We actually have one pact that has been signed in these last weeks with 18 local governments from Peru. And then in these processes, we have decided to actually promote people to be engaged in the process and learn how to do it, so they can actually take the concepts and take the tools and take all the information and, of course, the data evidence process into their areas. So our methodology, as you can see, and it is also, of course, I want to say it very clear, it is not as tactical urbanism as it is everywhere. We think we can use tactical urbanism techniques, but it is not the main focus of the process. And as you can see in this graph that I'm showing, the actual public space transformation, or the actual public space project, is actually in the middle of the process. It's not the end. We are not aspiring to just transform the area, that area or so, but actually to influence or have something to say in public policies, in private practices, and of course in people's mindsets. So when and one of our strategies to do this is, of course, not only having the alliances, but also introducing a lot of tools for tracking the changes and actually have evidence to indicate where we have been successful and where we haven't. So we can actually introduce the process and the model as like a pre-step, a first step towards a major transformation of the area or the city if it is a bigger plan. So there are a couple of examples here. We have this one called Game. It was in the middle of the 2019 festival. We have a big forum every year. It was in a monumental area. It's pre-pandemic, so that's why you see people without masks, which is I don't know. I think everyone misses that. And then the other one, it is in El Agustino. It is a school, and it was a school that was heavily polluted. People actually burn trash here. You can see, and in the top of here, you can see that maybe the windows that have been blocked because of the smokes and all the pollution. And the school was known as Colegio Basurita, which is like a garbage school. And now, and after the transformation, which was aimed for kids and for the community, actually they increased the rate of kids enrolled in the scholar period. So it was quite satisfying to actually have this metric, which we were not expecting to have as a result of the process. And we have another ones here. The one on the bottom is in Alto Perú, Chorrillos, which is a place that right now, in this moment, we have been having a traffic of land, and there have been lots of people going there trying to settle in these areas which are have some historical value. And the one over here, it was like a modular car that will be running around the streets, in this case of the historical center of Lima, and activating these areas that were about to be pedestrianized in a near future. So what happened during the pandemic? We found ourselves and everyone locked in and start missing quite heavily the public space and the experience of being outside. So suddenly, lots of people that never care or actually think on the public spaces were like, oh, I want to go to the park. I miss to walk around my neighborhood. So then we say, okay, so we have here an opportunity to actually push for some public opinion in terms of the right to have better and more public spaces. So on that terms, we started working with two processes. One is this, it's called Reinicia tu Barrio, Restart Your Barrio, which aims to work with people and trying to strengthen their social bonds and to actually have them activate some networks inside the neighborhoods and in between the people to actually give some assistance trying to cope with the pandemic and of course the economical crisis. This has also an idea of reusing the public space and the areas that are unable to be used in regular terms to actually bring on some economic opportunities for people, which are of course informal in most of the cases, but we were thinking that we don't need to be so picky on what we can promote because of course a major crisis needs major measures. So the idea of having these communities organized and identifying their strengths and their weakness were quite good in terms of having them a little bit more empowered and being able to actually resist some of the processes in the for the pandemic. So you have like, I don't know, all the mapping of the public equipment and the private equipment, all the vulnerabilities and all the individual values. There are people like, I don't know, people that own the person that owns a car, the lady that is a teacher, the other person that is, I don't know, a health worker. So on, no? So this process, we have been making it into a couple of areas in the city. One was Santa Beatriz. We worked with them almost virtually. It was possible in terms of the socioeconomics profile of the neighborhood in this case. And also we have been working in Pamplona Alta, which has a lot more challenges in terms of poverty and vulnerability. We have also need to be there in person. So in these two processes, people are actually able to identify where they will need more help. And for example, here in Pamplona Alta, of course, it was some of the ollas comunes, which are these communal work towards having food for the daily needs of people. So, well, here's another one in the remark. We have also been doing some virtual actions, with the idea of actually having some impact also in the public media. So, for example, we have this one, which was, it's all virtual. We would love them to have them physically, but it was done during our, we have a major political crisis. I'm sure the Peruvians have told you our pain and sorrow through this time until today. But we have this huge repression in November, and a couple of people, well, a lot of people were injured and a couple of people died. So we started trying to actually have some memorials and some with some strength, so this will never happen and that democracy will not be affected again. So, and also another of the areas which has the other projects that we have been promoting was about making the government accept that they need a national strategy on public spaces, with these ideas of the pandemic, with these ideas of the public space and the different uses that you can actually go towards it in the public space, not only for like going from one place to another, but actually to living a better life that is now restricted to your house, but of course in terms of health and security. So we have been successful on that, despite, I don't know, 3 governments and lots of conversations with different ministers and authorities. And we end up having, the government end up having like a guide, a lot of guides that they're producing. We were just yesterday discussing the guide of Vías Activas, of like to make some streets into pedestrianized for sometimes, and also to use the streets for gastronomy, for restaurants, for cultural activities, and so on, which sounds quite obvious, but at the same time here it was neither a thing, neither a priority. So now we do have it here in the picture. You have the mayor of Cusco and the Ministry of Housing, and this is me, walking around and checking how this setup was working now for the community. So this is kind of what we were pushing. We also were pushing to not close the beaches, not only because of the idea of the summer economy, which was important, especially for the most vulnerable people, but actually to think about the public spaces as a big and diverse place, and that we need to address all of them, not only like the beaches. So we lost that. Actually, the beaches remain closed for all the summer mostly, but at the end, they start working on these guides, which is quite good. So, well, now we are just for closing, we are going to start next week with this course on, which is a laboratory of different projects put together for the Pact for Public Spaces, which we have these 18 local governments. It is a course. I think we closed yesterday, but if someone is interested, you can say that I invited you, and then maybe Lucas that work with me will be mad, but I will manage that. So if you want to enroll, you're welcome, please. And also, I would like to invite you for our 6th forum. Now we have changed the name to Festival because it's more of a party and a big space. We do have an open call for experiences, and we will have more open calls for them. It is cost-free, so please feel free to disseminate the information. And of course, if you have something to share or you want to be to participate, you are absolutely welcome. So that's it. I think, yeah, that's everything I have to say. I was not able to look at my clock, so I hope I won't, I wasn't taking too much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. You did perfectly well on time. It was spot on. And thank you also for introducing us to this important concept of citizens urbanism. I think one very interesting strategy that you're taking is like this cross-sector collaboration throughout different lines of work. I think that's very unusual and quite interesting to see. So now I will introduce Jose. Jose Lobo is interested in determinants of metropolitan economic performance and location-specific economic growth, the application of machine learning, data mining, and spatial statistics methods to the study of socioeconomic data, causes and consequences of urban size and scale, and how the characteristics of individuals, organizations, institutions, and social networks interact to create regions of innovation. Professor Lobo has acted as visiting researcher at the Santa Fe Institute and Italy's Università di Moderna e Reggio Emilia. Currently, he is on the faculty steering committee for Arizona State University's Center for Social Dynamics and Complexity, and is also associate research professor in the School of Sustainability at ASU. He joined Arizona State University in 2005. Jose holds both an MS and a PhD in regional science from Cornell University. So Jose, please take us on.
Buenos días, buenas tardes. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you all and hopefully engage you in a conversation. Let me quickly share my screen, hoping that it works. Hopefully you can all see it. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is I'll try to persuade you that as we envision the urban future, and hopefully a very different urban future, we actually have a lot to learn by understanding the past. So I'm going to persuade you that part of us redesigning, reinventing cities, not only in Latin America, but throughout the world, but especially in the developing world, there's much that we can learn by taking another look at the past. So of course, everybody understands that this is the setting that pretty soon, by 2050, and most of us will be alive, we will become a planet of cities. So this process that was begun 7,000 years ago of urbanization will be largely complete. And by now, after many decades of studying both economic growth and urbanization, we understand that urbanization is itself one of the main drivers of socioeconomic development. So for many who think about the challenge of sustainable development, one very specific aspect of that challenge is how can cities continue to play the role that they have historically played? And by historically, I mean really going back not just 50 years, 100 years, historically throughout the history of urbanization. Cities have played this role of being drivers of development. But how can that continue to happen while at the same time cities become drivers of sustainable development and shared sustainable development, not just development for the elite. So I'm using here sustainable to be very broad. It's not only about economic development, it's about shared prosperity, it's about decreasing inequality. So how can this be done? By now we're all familiar with a lot of the work that has been done that has established this close relationship between urbanization and economic development. Although we also have learned that when cities do that, and they do it well, it's not just accidental, it's not, going to Mariana's phrase, it's not just, well, dejar a las ciudades. We also know that for cities to be drivers of development in a way that that development is shared requires intervention, requires policymaking and citizen participation. But one big takeaway, now, you might want to think, you might be thinking, since sustainability is really about the future, and as I said earlier, hopefully a very different future. Why should we devote scarce attention resources to revisiting the past? And to me, actually, this is one of the best answers. And when people ask me this statement you have here, it's one of the very best answers I have come across. This notion of why do we actually should care about the past, other than because it's interesting? Well, if you think about it, the only proof that we have that the future can be different, or that the future can be very different. So I want to emphasize that it's not just a little bit different. It's because the present is very different from the past. So our present is a living proof that things can be very different. And I got this phrase from this. There's a banner that hangs at the entrance of the Swedish History Museum in Stockholm. And I think this is a very beautiful statement. This is, to me, the main justification for thinking about this question. As we think about how different can the urban past, can the urban future be, it's in a sense another version of the question, just how different is today's urban present? Just how different are cities today? Now, of course, it's not hard to make a list of the differences. Take Phoenix, Arizona, where I live. Yes, and you ask me, well, compare Phoenix to Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztecs. Of course, it's very easy to make a list of what's different. But what I think is more interesting is to think deeply of what's common. And notice that you probably all find the following. When I say Phoenix is a city, and I also use the phrase Tenochtitlan was a city, everybody knows what I mean, even though you also all assume that Tenochtitlan was very different in many ways. So what is this thing, the city, that has persisted? And by now, I want to emphasize, one of the things is many, many disciplines, many, here I'll just list a few, you can read the list, have been studying cities for decades. And we have accumulated a lot of insights about cities, how they grow, how they prosper, the interaction between urban areas and the environment, determinants of inequality. So for example, we know that when we think about urban systems in the past, some of those urban systems and some of those urban areas were actually much less unequal than contemporary cities. You all probably know about the example of Athens. But I'll give you another example of a city that was remarkably egalitarian. Teotihuacan. You might be aware of Teotihuacan. It was a tremendous urban system in Mesoamerica. And to this day, for example, there is no evidence that Teotihuacan had a king. And when we look at various metrics, including health, and et cetera, we now know that Teotihuacan was as egalitarian. I'm not saying it was egalitarian, but was comparable to Athens. So now we have two examples of two cities, large cities in the past, that had inequality levels lower than New York City today. And you also, and here I just want to impress you by an example of just, we really have been studying cities for some time. We have learned a lot about urbanization. Now, most recently, there's a push, a drive to develop what has come to be known as urban sustainability science, an effort at integrating various perspectives to not to replace all these other disciplines that have been studying cities, but to integrate insights. And here I just show you some recent studies, reports that are advocating for the scientific community to develop urban sustainability science. And I think the key of this new development of urban sustainability science is this notion that the city being various things at once. It's a social entity, it's a political entity, it's a cultural entity, it's an ecological environment, that the city should be seen as its own unit of analysis. And here I have a quote from Paul Romer, who won the Nobel Prize in 2018. Okay, so I think by now, these are some key messages that if we can ever get together in a coffee shop in person, we could talk about this for hours. So we have learned that indeed there are fundamental social processes that we can identify across cities, across time and geographies. Yes, there are many things that make cities today and in the past different, but there are some fundamental social processes that we can identify. There are things we can measure in Mayan urban systems and in the urban system of medieval Europe and the urban system of China today that are common properties. So it is feasible to indeed compare cities and urbanization today with cities and urbanization in the past. No, so now again, great. But what does this, how can this inform many of us, academics, politicians, citizens, who again are thinking about urban sustainability, transforming our cities? So here I want to give you talk a little bit about really a very new research agenda, very, very new, that has to do with settlement persistence, that has to do with trying to understand why some cities and some urban systems lasted hundreds and even thousands of years. And by the way, there has long been this notion in sustainability science, people, that endurance and surviving shocks and existing for a long time is essential for sustainability. And recently, Clark and Hurley, two very prominent researchers in sustainability, wrote this sort of review paper of sustainability science. In the United States, people tend to think that sustainability science is about 20 years old. So where are we? And there's this, they call for this emphasis to pay more attention about the past, not just the last 50 years. And you have to remember that, again, there were many ancient urban systems that lasted 500 years, 1,000 years, way longer than modern capitalism, way longer. So this is almost like a psychology test. So next time you meet someone, okay, once we can go out to coffee shops, ask them, you can ask them this question. Let's say I tell you, let's say I tell Eduardo, here I'm seeing his face. Eduardo, I'm gonna tell you about an urban system, name whatever, I'm gonna give you a name. And I tell you, it lasted for about 800 years. So then I will ask Eduardo, what's your first immediate reaction? Are you impressed that, wow, it lasted 800 years? Or are you disappointed? Like, what was wrong with them? They only lasted 800 years. What did they do wrong? And the point here is that collapse, you know, this story of, oh, for example, the Maya collapse. Yes, they did, but they lasted 800 years. Is anybody here really confident that modern capitalism can last 800 years? And so the fact, again, there are reasons why collapse has attracted much more attention academically in the popular press. You know, collapse is about hubris, overreach, pestilence, violence, war, greed. I think that if you like Game of Thrones, the TV series, you'll probably like to read about collapse. I mean, it has all those elements. But what this has meant is that stories of endurance, the fact that there are areas, settlements, and settlement systems. I like to use settlement rather than cities so we can avoid the controversy of which is what is a city. We know that there are many instances of settlements and settlement systems that persisted for a long time. And we actually, I mean, we know that, we sort of know the birth date and the death certificate. But when you think about, but what are the processes by which cities or systems lasted a long time? When you think about cultural practices or institutional continuity or demographic scale, sometimes the population increase, some decrease. We actually know very little about those aspects. We know very little. What I think this is important, why I believe this is a useful research agenda, is because for a city or an urban system to persist involves processes that are very relevant to the urban sustainability transition. Obviously, if a city or an urban system is going to persist over time, it has to change. It has to adapt. There might be environmental shocks. There might be social shocks. It has to exhibit resilience. Somehow, the elites, the population, the commoners, the farmers, the workers, they have to learn. So they have to solve very complicated collective action problems. They often have to reinvent themselves. And we hear this phrase, So even in contemporary urban systems. So for example, if you live in the United States, you often hear the phrase that Boston reinvented itself, meaning that nowadays we think of Boston of Harvard, MIT, the knowledge economy, all the smart people walking around. But in the 1950s, Boston was a manufacturing city. And actually, so were most cities in the United States Northeast. About various things happened, manufacturing left, and many of the cities of the United States Northeast actually went into a decline from which they haven't gotten out of. But Boston reinvented itself, meaning somehow it went from being a manufacturing center to now everybody's example of a knowledge economy. How did that happen? To me, one of the most dramatic examples of urban reinvention or survival is take Shanghai. It survived Japanese occupation. It survived the Civil War. It survived the Cultural Revolution. And Shanghai, there is today a vibrant economy. What was it about Shanghai? Is it that it was just next to a river? Is that it? So we know the stories of urban systems that persisted, that reinvented themselves. We also know that some of these long urban systems, so let's take ancient Rome. Very curious, as Mariana was saying, now the people are interested in cities because of the pandemic. So one thing that has happened is the scholars have now rediscovered or are now paying attention to the role of pandemics in ancient urban systems. So for example, for people who study ancient Rome, yes, we know it lasted 2,000 years, and then it came to an end. And nowadays, historians tell us that one of the main reasons, I guess maybe in high school you learn about the barbarians coming across the border, attacking Rome, yes. But one of the main factors in the decline of Rome was that towards the end of the empire, Rome was affected by 2 plagues. We don't know exactly what was the biological element. We believe one of them might have been the bubonic plague. And those 2 plagues very much decimated the population of ancient Rome, which meant that ancient Rome actually had a hard time recruiting people to serve in the Roman legions. So now we can say that our present, we now know a little bit of what it's like for a city to be affected by a pandemic. So I think that there is this emerging research agenda of trying to go back to the past, not to impose our moral standards today, not to just simply look for stories of failure, but to try to understand persistence. And perhaps, I argue, if we understand better how were some social systems, some urban systems, able to adapt to shocks and survive for way longer than any urban system today has lasted, perhaps we could learn. And I will leave you one tantalizing bit of research. Part of this research agenda has been researchers studying inequality. You know, inequality was also for a long time, inequality was not a big part of urban science or urban studies. We somehow had this idea that, yeah, if a place gets wealthy, somehow the wealth will be distributed. We now know that's not the case. So there has been a renewed interest in studying inequality, as I mentioned earlier, in ancient urban systems. And we're beginning to learn that there were indeed differences. There were some urban systems that were much autocratic, much hierarchical, some which were less. I don't want to paint a picture of ancient urban systems as being egalitarian, no. But there were differences that we can measure. So one obvious question is, were those urban systems that were characterized by less inequality, more equal distribution of resources? Can we see evidence that those urban systems had the ability to adapt more and therefore last more than urban systems? And by the way, Mariana, one of the most incredibly hierarchical urban systems of the past were the Incas. And in fact, many archaeologists would argue that the Incas were the first example of a controlled economy. I mean, it's remarkable. So you ask, the fact that they were so hierarchical, it did give the Inca society and the urban system some advantages, but did it make it more fragile? And it is very tempting to understand, to realize that when the Spaniards came over, when all those illiterate Castilian thugs came over from Spain, they were perhaps lucky that they encountered two societies, the Inca and the Aztecs, that were extraordinarily hierarchical, were extraordinarily unequal, which meant that there was a lot of very unhappy people who were misled by the Spaniards into that. Join us and we'll get rid of your oppressor, and then we'll talk about what we'll do later. But more seriously, there might be some evidence that settlement persistence in the past might be related to how unequal or not those urban societies were. And that will be a tremendous insight for us, because we might need to realize that if we're going to achieve this sustainability transition, it cannot just be about energy efficiency or less CO2 emissions. It has to be about poverty and power and violence. So I'll stop here. So I leave you with this proposition that as we envision the future, we can learn from going back to the past. And we'll see in 5 years or 10 years whether this research agenda pans out. But I'll stop here and let's have more discussion then.
Wow, this has been very, very enlightening and very much out of what I was expecting personally. I am convinced that the past definitely can give us insight about the future just from this presentation. And as well, I've realized with Jose, your talk, that the benefit of hindsight into the past can give us a lot of insight into both failures of civilization as well as successes, and learning from both would be important. So now I'm going to transition to the Q&A session. I'm going to pose the first question for both of you, our amazing panelists. And it's sort of the same question, just geared towards each of your presentations. And it relates to urban labs and urban experimentation as a way to shed light on the principles or features that a city exhibits, through which a city exhibits persistence or evolution or transformation towards a more sustainable form of urban environments. And so for Mariana, what I'd like to ask is, what are the main principles or features of those direct interventions that you've been able to do through Lima Como Vamos, that are also based on data, but at the same time have this quasi-experimental kind of nature, and which are the greatest insights, on your opinion, that you've been able to gather from your urban observatory that can give us some general guidance on the future?
All right, so well, the concept of experimentation itself, it is quite difficult to grasp if we are talking about the government. The bureaucracy and the system, the public system, is indeed averse to risk. They don't want to fail. They have a lot of constrictions and a lot of sanctions when they fail. So for a public servant, it's quite difficult to actually include processes that the outcome is not predefined. So but that's why the contracts and the licitations will be saying, we want, 15 buses with these colors and whatever, right? And you are not able to change anything at all, even though maybe those requirements were 10 years ago, and now the demand is different and the systems will need another feeder. So this also happens within the participation processes. The model is designed for as little participation and as short in the time, and of course with no resources allocated to it. And that's also because make people being involved brings risks, and maybe the project that you were willing to socialize will not be successful or will not be the one that people wanted. And then you need to start again and to make your, I don't know, expediente técnico and your documents, and the bureaucracy starts all over, and then you will have the project again in 5 years for listation. So within that, we think that looking for intermediators or facilitators, or these in-between spaces between the final users and the government that is so tight on the processes, is a good way to actually put something to work. So you can put people to work together without the constraints of the public threats for the public servants, and of course without also the different perspective of people that a lot of times are quite emotional, which is of course good, but it's difficult for the public servants to deal with it. With saying that, maybe one of the lessons is that it is impossible to make something quick. The quick way will result in something bad, or in something poor, or in something I don't know, not actually fit. And I am saying this not only for like big urban projects or big regeneration processes, but also for small tactical urbanism programs. You actually need to go in depth with people to gather what they actually need, and then you need to and collectively need to take out what is not adding to the process. Because I don't know, you have lots of maybe neighborhood leaders that could be political biased, which is of course they're right, but at the same time it will not help for them. Okay. So my kid wants to join in. I think he wants to go to jail after school. So then we, and I think that's one of the most important situations. So when I say it's not quick, I'm not saying that it will last like 10 years, of course, because it will not being, we will not get to anything at no point. But we actually need to be serious about what type of processes we want. For example, we have been in a meeting with some persons from a ministry, and they were telling us that they want to make this participatory process, no? And then in the middle of the conversation, they actually say that they have the area of the land was already assigned. They do have the type of houses. They have even they have the designs. And I was joking. So you have already picked, I don't know, the type of floor of the bathroom, because then you do not need a participatory process. You need a convencimiento. I don't know how to say it in English. You need to convince this person to actually take the project that you are giving to them. And maybe they do have the right reasons. They have less money. This was the only area that they can be able to actually have available or so. But you can also do a process within that. And of course, this project fails. And the failure now is adjudicated to these bad people that will share misinformation. And we were saying then, well, but the information that you didn't give is filled with these ideas or fears, or I don't know, even fake news, because you are failing as not considering the people of this of the project equals. You were thinking of them as, okay, poor people, we can give this as this is what we have. So I guess that's kind of the ideas I can say. Also, and just another lesson. When we work with temporal materials and with temporal equipment, we need to take them out at the right time. We cannot left them forever. They are not built for too long, and then it will be getting worse. We have learned that through a hard way once when we have these people organizing and to defend their park, which was threatened for being privatized. And they asked us to please not take away the materials and the stuff of the intervention that we have been doing there. And we agree. And of course, after a couple of months, it was all destroyed because of the material itself, not even because of misuse. So even though it helped them to make their point and the park was not privatized, we also need to be careful on which is the role of everyone involved in the process. And our role was to protect the space and to take the stuff when it was the time and not later on. So that's it. Thank you, Diego.
Yeah, what a great answer. And going off of these processes that you talk about, Mariana, I'd like to ask Jose sort of the same question, but looking at the past. And the past can also be looked as a lab, as like this quasi-experimental random set of events that, of course, when they were happening, people did not have any specific intention, right? Or they could have had the intention, but the outcome of that event is always subject to random events. And so what basic processes or features can the past tell us about sustainable evolution of urban landscapes and cities in general?
Oh, thank you. That is in a sense the essential question. So there are various comments I can make, and I will actually relate my answer to your question to the question posed by Anthony. So when we think about, if you take the perspective that as we think about urban sustainability science, if it's going to become a science, and it needs to have, theoretical underpinnings. My first training was in physics, and so I guess I still like to think about theories. I like to think about theories of human behavior. But if you're going to build theories, one of the ingredients you need a lot of data, and you need variability. Otherwise, you cannot identify what's fundamental. So one advantage of looking into the urban past is that, as you said, Diego, we encounter a lot of variability, much more than we encounter today. Today, most cities in the Western world are pretty similar. Yes, of course, there are significant differences, but I think you will all agree with me that even in how they look, as we go further back, it's almost like you can see humanity experimenting with this thing called cities. And so we find a lot more variability in how cities were managed, in how cities were organized. But there are some commonalities, and Anthony, you point out to some of the most essential ones. Every city throughout history and in the present needs to bring in energy, needs to bring in resources, and needs to take out waste. That is, every city needs to solve those issues. If we consider infrastructure not just as physical, like, okay, you have to build a canal to bring water. When you think about the social infrastructure, that also needs to be in place to allow people to live in close proximity. And then we examine that variability. We can and have been learning some, I think, useful lessons as we think about one of the most tangible things that we're going to have to do as we transition to sustainable urban development is infrastructure. I don't know, the World Bank has turned around a figure that in the next 20 years, we're going to have to invest almost $3 trillion in new infrastructure. And of course, we already have a lot of engineering knowledge about thinking about that infrastructure. But there can be some useful lessons about, well, what made some infrastructure systems more flexible, more resilient, more able to absorb shocks, and what do not. Let's take the example of water, an essential input for any city. And you think about, it's not just an aqueduct or a canal that's involved in bringing water to the city. Usually, cities don't exist in isolation, so bringing water to any one place affects bringing water to other places. So when we think about the physical and social infrastructure. Is it flexible or not? And I'll give you an example of an infrastructure that has to do with water that's terribly inflexible and is becoming a problem. And it affects the city where I live, Phoenix. So most of you probably don't know, because if you don't live in the United States, what should you? But there's actually a set of agreements from the 19th century that regulate how much water can Phoenix, Los Angeles, Las Vegas get, or cotton farmers in California. There's this legal apparatus that dates from the 19th century that still is in place today. Everybody recognizes that, 19th century is a little bit old, we should revise this. So for example, cotton farms in California get more water than Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Tucson combined. Okay, but this system of who gets what, which was crafted in the 19th century, is no one wants to make the first move. So it is proven to be completely inflexible. Everybody recognizes this needs to be revised. We have to rethink how we use water. But we have this agreement, this social legal infrastructure that no one wants to revise. And I'm going to contrast this. By the way, we here in Phoenix, we live in this very dry area. You know, we're actually at the northernmost tip of the Sonora Desert. For over 1,000 years, there was a group of people here known as the Hohokam, who long predated the wrath of the Spaniards. And they built an incredible irrigation system without a centralized state, by the way. And that irrigation system lasted for over 1,000 years and irrigated hundreds of communities. You can still, you fly over the Arizona, you can still see the ruins of those lines. So the Hohokam were able to build an irrigation system by hand, which they were able to adapt for more than 1,000 years. And it worked. And by the way, some of the canals that they built we're still using today. We have this legal infrastructure regulating water in the American Southwest. That's, no one has any idea how we can modify it. So you might want to think about, when you think about infrastructure going into the future, be flexible, be modular, make it easy to change. So to your point, Diego, I think this might be some of these lessons as we learn about, okay, why did the Hohokam lasted 1,000 years? It's amazing. And I would not bet that the urban system of the American Southwest, the United States, will last 1,000. I'm not even going to bet that it will last 200 years. I mean, I'm not a betting person, but the key is to identify what are the things that are common to all cities: infrastructure, interactions. So that will be my short answer. But maybe you'll say, there's one point I want to emphasize about Mariana said, because as I said, I'm a physicist, so I like experiments. And I very much like this metaphor of cities as urban laboratories. But it's crucially important, not only from the standpoint of, well, can you actually get useful data, but from the standpoint of human decency, that the urban poor and the urban communities need to be involved in the design of the experiments. See, very often we do experiments on the poor. It's like Mariana said, look, we're going to experiment on you. We're going to move you. We're going to build you this new type of bathroom. We're going to do this and that to you. Very rarely do we ask the urban poor, and I'm going to use Mariana's example. How would you like your bathrooms to be? You know, just, so I think going forward, all these experiments that we need to do in urban sustainability have to involve the urban poor. If not, we are not going to have urban sustainability. We're going to have the elite changing cities to their own benefits. And well, I hope that's not what we want, but.
Mariana, would you like to add anything to this issue of sustainable infrastructure and logistics?
No, I don't know. I really like what Jose has said. I do think that when we're dealing with under-resourced cities, the opportunity when we actually get people's involved is important, and because we have not only little resources, but we do have a lot of political changes and instability, right? So I know why it is being such a challenge to actually do things right, even willing to do it. Of course, we do have a lot of people that will not even care or so. So I guess that this could be quite, I guess that this could be one point where maybe from Yale or from other spaces could work towards trying to fix how tools or systems or innovation will help to actually guarantee the results despite all these processes, because the ideal world will not come. They still will not have money, still will not have the systems, still will not have the tools or the resources or whatever, and maybe, hopefully, they will have the will to actually do the things good. So I guess that will be quite a good field to actually experiment, and I guess that a lot of brilliant minds could help on that too. But I don't know, I would love to keep talking on this, but I guess we have time limits.
But maybe
Yeah,
to add,
there you go,
again,
everyone. Go ahead, Jose. Go ahead.
just to add to Mariana said also, we are beginning to see, so worldwide, I've had the good fortune over the last 10 years of working with slum dwellers organizations from throughout the world. And you now see many examples of organization from slums. The slum is just a poor neighborhood. And poor neighborhoods, by the way, have been part of urban history forever. But in many parts of the world, we do have these poor communities. And very often, these poor communities have knowledge and information that the authorities do not have. So I can tell you, for example, that if you ask the mayor of Mumbai, US mayor, how many slums are there in Mumbai? And he will go to the window and he will give a ridiculous number. And I told him, so you don't know. You actually don't know how many poor people live in Mumbai. You have no idea how to deliver services to the poor people of Mumbai. You don't have any idea of how to build new sewage systems in very dense neighborhoods. But you know what? If you ask the people who live in these very dense slums in Mumbai, like Dharavi, they know. And by the way, when vaccination is taking place in Mumbai now, largely through the role of slum organizations, but because the health authorities in India will be completely incapable of organizing vaccination campaigns on the floor, on the ground. So I think, again, involving the urban poor is not just a matter of decency. It's that very often we need to work with them to learn things like how many people live in these slums? What do they do in these slums? How can we build a sewage system? Just how? Tell me. Who are we going to move? If you don't ask them, you're going to end up with these disastrous projects like, well, whoever I think should be moved, and this is how I think. And by the way, at least in Latin America, you know that both the left and the right for decades now had the same policies for slums. This was one area in which the left and the right were identical. And they did to slums. They never really asked slums. So maybe that's one thing we can all agree for. We have to work with the urban poor, and they have to be involved in designing solutions. And if we agree on that, and we actually start doing it, I predict we will have better results. So.
Well, I guess we'll leave it at that. That's great inspiration for all the Yaleys and other students attending this webinar. So thank you, Jose. Thank you, Mariana, so much for this incredible talk and very interesting discussion. Now I'll pass it on to Claudia and Eduardo to actually give us the closing remarks of the entire conference, which has been definitely a ride.
Thank you so much, Mariana, Jose, and Diego. I truly enjoyed your presentations, and you left us with some great food for thought. And I could not think of a better way to finish our conference, truly. Now we will hear some closing remarks on behalf of the Council on Latin American and Iberian Studies at the Yale Macmillan Center, also known as CLAIS, Dr. Eduardo Fernandez Duque, He's a professor in the Department of Anthropology and at the School of the Environment here at Yale, and he will do this honor for us. Dr. Eduardo Fernández Duque is a co-founder of Fundación ECO, a not-for-profit organization promoting education in northern Argentina. He is also a corresponding member of the Argentine Council for Science and Technology. He's a National Geographic explorer and a guest professor of the Universidad Nacional de Formosa of Argentina and the Universidad San Francisco de Quito of Ecuador. Dr. Fernández Duque is originally from Argentina, and he completed his first degree in biology at the University of Buenos Aires before receiving his PhD in animal behavior at the University of California at Davis. He was a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard, the Smithsonian Institution, the Zoological Society of San Diego, and a faculty member of the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Fernández Duque has published over 130 articles and has contributed to the training of more than 300 students from 15 different countries. Dr. Fernández Duque has received many accolades, including Premio Raíces, awarded in 2017 by the Argentine National Ministry of Science and Technology to recognize his contributions to the development of science and technology through international cooperation. Eduardo, we are glad to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Muchas gracias a todos. It does make me a little bit uncomfortable. Thanks for that beautiful summary. But I want to bring it down to us just talking human being to human being. And I took notes. I'll be totally honest. I couldn't attend all the sessions. I attended the one defending the Amazon and today's session, the one we have just finished. And I took some notes, but when Claudia Valeja is the director of CLISE, the Council for Latin American and Iberian Studies, invited me, asked me if I wanted to make the closing remarks. The single reason why I said yes is because it's an absolutely 100% student-organized, student-led initiative. So I imagine that most in the audience know that. And those of us coming down in the curve of our professional lives, more and more find motivation in talking to our younger colleagues. I feel like there's so much motivation in seeing you organize this. I just want to be sure that we do mention, because we have heard from Diego, we have heard from Claudia and Mariana, but there's also Amy Oliver and Mariana Camacho and Alexandra Thorne and Claudia Ochoa and Carlos Velázquez and Carolina Salazar, all those who have been working behind the scenes. Those of us having organized conference, we know that there are usually 2 or 3 who are out there leading, but thanks to all of you, this is fantastic. I really enjoyed the presentations that I was able to attend. It made me think, I'll connect to the introduction that was made of me. I studied behavior all my life, and we had already in the last couple of presentations made either explicit or implicit reference to human behavior. I was lucky to be at the 2 major biomes that were described. I mean, the Amazon, I've been to the Maya forest. I've been lucky to see so many of our countries in Latin America. And if there's one reason that I'm optimistic, is because we know human behavior can be changed. And now the last 2 presentations were really forcing us to reflect at 2 very different time scales, right? We were listening to Mariana discuss how things are being done now. We're listening to Jose tell us to look back into the past. And one is a summary of how humans behaved. Mariana is telling us how people are behaved as we go today. I definitely agree with Jose, the importance of looking at the past. Sometimes I wish that some of our own countries in Latin America were to pay more attention to all the mistakes that other countries have already made. And it seems like we're only importing what they're doing now without noticing all the mistakes they've made. And it looks like we want to repeat them. So very much to the past. I think it was Diego who said in the opening remarks to the conference that yes, we are hopefully looking at the end of a pandemic, something we've never experienced. It's creating new opportunities. Anytime we look into the past, into history, we realize that after every crisis, there is a new opportunity. When I'm talking to you guys, I'm feeling like we should also realize that every time there's a new generation, there's a new opportunity. And so you you cannot accept that things don't happen quick. I still relate to that. You're young, you want to see change quick. Don't give up, because even if only if you ask for a quick, it'll happen at whatever pace it happens. We need that energy. We need your compromise, and better be wrong, but try, than just wait for somebody to let you decide what you need to do. So I know that I didn't comment much on the content, but it hasn't been for lack of information that these things have not been fixed. I think that most of the crises that we have to face have to do with human behavior. And Jose was a physicist. I'm a scientist by training, but change is not going to come from our rational mind. Change is going to come when we combine our emotional mind, our love for the outdoors, for the environment, for our cities, with the rational knowledge we have. So thanks for organizing it. I look forward to being part of it next year. I'm around. I'm always eager to meet our young colleagues who own the future. And so thank you and congratulations on a wonderful conference.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for these very kind words. I think we can now close. Claps for everyone, for the entire organization team, and for the panelists today.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias a todos y que todos estén saludables.
Eso.
Chao, chao. Buen fin de semana.
Gracias.